And good afternoon from Philadelphia. Frank here with an episode of UFO News Network Sunday. We've got a big panel, a big show, so let me get right to my co-host, Chant Hanna, and she can introduce everybody and get the ball rolling. How are you today, Chant?
I'm doing well, Frank. Thank you so much. This is going to be such a great show. We have such a fabulous guest panel. On our show today, we're talking about the topic of UFO data, the compilation of it, and what does one do with it once they acquire it. Considering the UFO topic has always been a decentralized initiative, it is not surprising the efforts to organize it have been similarly independent and uncoordinated. With the rapid growth in the number of UFO sightings as folks have more access to technology to look at the sky, use applications to do so, and many other tech advances, it is imperative UFO organizations have a good, reliable system for data collection and the categorizing of it. One goal and challenge of many UFO organizations and individuals regarding this distributed catalog type system is the ability to provide access to everything in the UFO database collection through one totally integrated catalog. Today we have a huge panel of guests with us to talk about how this 50 to 70-year-old topic, or possibly longer, has grappled with a voluminous amount of UFO-related data. Today on the show, we have Peter Davenport of the UFO Reporting Center. We also have Earl Grey, who is the director of Southern California MUFON. And we have Ruben Uriarte, who is the director of Northern California MUFON. We also have scientist Roger Stankovic, director of Australia MUFON. We have Marc D, astronomer and chief forensic analyst, video and photos and more for MUFON. We also have Shane Hurd, who is the assistant director for Phoenix MUFON. We have Dr. Irena Scott, who is the author of many UFO books. Ohio historian, has written a book on that. She is the great-niece of grandniece of John Purdue. And let's see, have I left anybody out? I know there might be a few other folks. Anybody else, Frank?
Yeah, this is Jan Aldrich.
Jan, we have Jan Aldrich of Project 1947. Thank you, Jan. UFO. He's actually he is a historian and researcher. And then we also have the venerable Michael W. Hall, who has known Peter Davenport for years, and he's been involved, like you all have, for decades on this UFO topic. He actually knew Coral Lorenzen and her husband Bob here in Arizona when they were involved in the UFO topic heavily. And he is a judge and also a lawyer. Michael W. Hall, also known as the paranormal lawyer, he has his own show, and he also has his own UFOI team. So he covers this topic on a regular. And by the way, I'd like to also mention Marc D has his own show also, and we'll be talking about that later on in the show. I wanted to go ahead and throw this question out there to our panelists. Wanted to ask everybody, if you had the opportunity to catalog a large compilation of UFO data, how does one go about actually cataloging it? And do you keep it to yourself, or do you centralize it worldwide? Anybody want to go ahead and address that question? Peter Davenport, how about we start with you?
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to respond, Chant. Well, my operation is pretty simple in the sense that just about everything I receive over the internet, I post to our website, ufocenter.com, so anybody who is interested in the subject will be able to see what I'm looking at as well. And we post it so that people can sort the data by the date of the occurrence, by the location of the occurrence, by state, province, and country, by the type of object seen, and by the date that the material was posted to our website. So that's how we do it, and that's, given that I work solo by myself, that's about all I'm able to do. We're not an investigative organization, as most people know. We're principally a clearinghouse for information.
Okay, wonderful. So we actually spoke, Peter, with Jan Harson on Friday and had a wonderful show with him regarding this topic. And he did mention how you bridge your information that you get regarding the UFO reports, those call-in reports, and then you actually share that data with MUFON. Can you explain that?
Yeah, MUFON is an investigative body, and very, very few, a very small percentage of reports, I feel, warrant follow-up investigation to any degree. But when we get a good one, I usually turn it over to Jan or to a MUFON representative for follow-up investigation so we can try to develop more information, get more witnesses, and so on. With regard to trying to find more witnesses, one of the things I usually do over the hotline is encourage a caller after the call and after they've submitted a report to go to the local news media, radio, television, and newspaper, try to get some publicity with the effort of with the intent of trying to get other witnesses to come forward. But that's the extent to which I investigate, and we leave investigation up to MUFON.
Great, thank you. Before I move on to the other guests, I wanted to bring up something kind of funny to you, Peter, and that is I know everybody on this panel has had to deal with this kind of situation before, and it might give you a chuckle, and that is back in the day, I remember going to a public library and pulling out from that huge wooden cabinet a long drawer that had the index card catalog. And looking stuff up that way by paper. I wanted to ask you, since technology has taken hold, how have you graduated from a very primitive system, possibly paper-oriented, to now? How did you streamline your cataloging UFO compilation data effort? Peter?
Well, this is Peter speaking. About the only thing we've done is computerize it, and that says it all, I feel. It catalogs the material in toto and allows us to sort through it to look for trends and anything else we may be searching for in the database. But I haven't gone to any great extent to catalog other than using a database and a computer.
Okay. I wanted to bring up a really important comment Jan Aldrich has made. Actually, he's made many comments because I went on social media and I made a post about this topic, the UFO data compilation and the cataloging of it. And he said a few things. I'm going to read what he said. He said, work like the Italians who decades ago bought compatible computer scanning equipment. Then they began scanning their files to a central location. When the government released its files, they traced down missing cases stuck in the bureaucracy. Most anything done in the USA was usually done in Italy 10 years before. Then he said, one more Heineck effort, evaluation of cases and reevaluation of PBB cases, reliability against strangeness. We'll have to ask you what you meant by that, Jan. And then the last one, this is a little bit of a long list, but I'm going to read it to you. Jan Aldrich said, regarding the compilation UFO data topic, number 1, GIGO, get rid of IFOs. 2, take out trivial cases. 3, assign subjective evaluation of confidence of data. 4, search for patterns, secondary patterns. 3rd, etc. In parentheses, see QFOS vehicle interference cases, report for examples, end of parenthesis. 5, run the data through filters for various aspects, attributes, activities, etc. Parentheses, see Hall's UFO evidence, 2 as a starting point, end of parenthesis. 6, feedback, constant feedback and redesign filters based on this. This may seem like a reinvent the wheel tactic, I think is what he meant. Valet has covered some of these problems. And then lastly, he concluded by saying, frankly, we are still in the collection phase after 70 years. Personally, I believe CE2 cases are the answer here. Jan, can you please expound upon what you stated there publicly on social media?
Okay. I've been collecting since the 50s. So I've got 5 rooms in my house full of UFO stuff. Plus I got a storage locker. Greenwood and I have started scanning our collections, making them digital. And we have a convention, so and if you want to see that, you can go to Project 1947 and then go to What's New and then look at the trip report. In there, we've put forward what we do. Essentially, we're by date. We're using the convention is by date, so, and we also put in what type of cases they are, where they originated, things like that. That's in the title, and you can search for specific kinds of cases that way. We've also started doing CUFOS, NICAP, CSI, Los Angeles, CSI, New York, all the organizations that poured into CUFOS, which are maybe 20 or so, and their files are integrated. So we have, I think we've got about somewhere between 35 and 40% of those files scanned and digitized. And as I say, it's a digital filing cabinet arranged by date. That means you can carry it with you, and you can share it with other people very easily.
Okay, Jen, I wanted to bring up something. You actually are head of Project 1947, created that project for good reason. I spoke to Jan on Friday regarding this topic, and he said that you share your data with MUFON. Can you explain how that works?
We're not sharing the data with MUFON. Maybe we will. I was supposed to go out there and see Jan a few years ago, but other things intervened. So what we're doing now is the CUFOS files, which I think are going to be shared with MUFON.
Okay, that's probably what he meant. Okay, yeah, I apologize for misspeaking on that. Do you work with MUFON in any way, shape, or form regarding the projects that you do?
Well, in the beginning of Project 47, yes, I did. I visited out there, but not recently, except to be a member.
Great. Yeah, I think that's what I was referring to regarding that topic. Okay, thanks very much for that, clearing that up. Okay, just wanted to move along here to the folks involved with MUFON. That would be Roger Stankovic, Director of Australia MUFON. We have Earl Grey, Director of Southern California MUFON. Then we have Ruben Uriarte, who is the director of Northern California MUFON. And I wanted to ask you all, we all know how MUFON categorizes things. Jan went over that very carefully. How would you all categorize the compilation of UFO data? Would you continue on in the manner that MUFON does and then add extra categories, or would you take some off? Would you centralize your effort and open up the vaults of the data to the whole world, to other countries, and work on that idea? How would you do it?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
There, Chant?
Yeah.
This is Chant. This is Chant. This is Ruben, and really great to be on with some great panelists there, and one gentleman there's several people there that I have a lot of respect with everyone, actually. But one of the things that I see myself using the data as for educational purposes, mainly the who, what, where, when, and what happened kind of situation. And what I do is I'll gather that data in order to give reports either at our meetings or mainstream organizations, just let people know what's going on in our skies. What is going on and what's being what is considered as the UFO compared to the IFO, where we get many of those reports. So it's a matter of education. But one thing that I wanted to bring up, you were talking about the cardboard, the catalog, system that in the libraries that you would go to research or find a particular topic. One of my former chief investigators, I'm sure Peter would remember him, and Marc, Steve Richmond, put together a great project. And he called it the UFO weather map. And what he did was he plotted the data from MUFON sightings as well as from Newfork. and some other databases. But basically, he would plot it manually on a map. And over a period of time, this became really valuable. This was before we had the UFO stalker, where it's automatic, where it's interactive. But basically, what Steve would do he would plot the location, a symbol, and everything. And this became really useful in terms of the maps became useful each month to the state directors. And I recall that when we had the Stephenville flap back in 2008, Steve was able to plot these clusters of activity or sightings, throughout the Southwest, and then you could see that. But gradually, you could see these sighting reports shifting from one part of the state of Texas to the other, and then you could see that you start seeing all the activity around the Stephenville area, and this was really of interest to the state director at that time, Ken Cherry, where he was involved with him, and the state chapter was involved in the follow-up and investigations of the Stevensville. So the data is definitely it's a very valuable tool, and all the gentlemen that are involved in putting together this type of data, it's valuable, and it will be much more valuable as time moves along. So I just wanted to make that short comment there.
For that input, really appreciate that so much, Ruben. Also wanted to bring into the huddle here Dr. Irena Scott, who was on the board of MUFON in the 2000s, early 2000s, I believe. And then also Marc D is an astronomer and has a Skywatch show, which is a very, very popular show and has millions of listeners around the world. I wanted to ask everybody there from MUFON, feel free to jump in, whoever wants to jump in first. Would you add an extra category or categories or shave off categories from the UFO compilation data effort? What are your thoughts on this topic? Anyone?
This is Roger. Oh, sorry.
So I think that was Roger. I think I heard Roger Stankovic, a director of MUFON Australia. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry if I was talking over somebody else there. I saw the program he had on with Jan recently, and he obviously described a lot of the functionalities of the CMS, or the case management system, in MUFON. And
a little louder, please.
Just address. Sorry, I'll just turn my volume up. I'm not sure whether I'm going to be turning it up or down. Can you hear me now?
Much better.
Yeah, much better. Okay, so I just said that I saw the video that Chant had done with Jan Hausen the other day, and Jan went into quite a bit of detail about how the CMS worked with MUFON, which is the case management system, and how he went through how it's got up to 200 data points that we collect on reports. We don't collect 200 on each report, but there's 200 there that we can actually obtain. I think it'd be pointless to put more data points there, but to be able to use those data points in a meaningful scientific way is what we should be doing more often. And what we need to do is to be able to select a data point and basically search for that particular data point more often and publish material on that. Say, for example, I wanted to know how many orbs were being seen in a particular area in Australia or whatever. There's a functionality within the CMS that enables you to be able to search for orbs and a particular, I'm not sure whether you can actually search a particular location, but there's certain fields that you can actually put keywords in that will actually give you then a list of all the cases that have come up with orbs, say for example blue orbs or something like that were seen by individuals that reported their sightings on the CMS. So I think that should really happen more often. People should be using the power of the CMS, the full functionality of it, because I don't see it that often. I don't see it, people publishing things in articles in the MUFON newsletter using this full functionality of CMS.
Those are all valid points. I think Dr. Irena Scott had wanted to say a few things. Dr. Irena?
Yes. One thing I think that needs more information on, and I don't think it's even exactly a category now, is the witnesses. And it's set up like just if you're somebody on a shore looking at a boat describing it. You don't know, in the case of UFOs, whether there's a relationship between the witnesses and the sighting. And you should be able to find out whether a witness has seen one or a number of UFOs, what age they were when they saw them, what kind of UFOs, and that sort of thing. Even more information on witnesses would be important, because a lot of people have said there are certain characteristics that are together that they found anecdotally with witnesses, that with things in common. I think they need to add that category and get all the information on witnesses that they can.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for that valuable input. And I know Earl Grey and Marc D are raring to talk here, so you guys can fight it out as to who's going to go next.
No fight. Let Earl go.
I was going to say you could go there, Mark.
Go right
Thank you. This is Earl Grey, and I'm Assistant State Director in Southern California and Chief Investigator. Wanted to clear that up because we don't want to get Jeff Krause angry. He's actually the State Director. So.
I promoted you, Earl.
I don't know if you can do that, but I don't know. I guess you should ask.
Email to Jeff then.
I know a bunch of us are friends with Jeff too, so we want to play nice here. But just talking about the CMS, I'm a big fan of it. I think it works really beautifully. You can put in these subgenres of different. I don't think that's the right word, but if you're looking for a triangular craft, you're looking for triangular craft that were up, say, near Bakersfield or in a particular region. You can find those, but you have to click. You do have to be proficient. You have to have a little bit of literacy in computers, to be able to utilize it. But you can find search a certain period of time. You can search for a particular shape of a craft, regions, time of day, time of evening. So for me, it really works very well, and I do use the CMS that way. Recently we've had quite a few sightings of black triangular craft up in, say, Palmdale, Bakersfield area, and kind of up near the Mojave area. And it was really interesting to go back in time and to look and see how many of those had been seen in that area. And there's been a number of them from before I was working for MUFON. So if you know how to use the CMS, it's a beautiful tool. A lot of, the categories are based on Dr. J. Allen Hynek's work. It's just tried and true stuff, and so you can see I'm a fan. If I could change one thing, perhaps it would be to say when we have SpaceX launches and stuff, and we get like 20 UFO reports about the same thing, it might be nice if we had more like a form letter or something that we could click that would categorize those cases instantly, rather than have to spend a couple of hours. Because that's, even if a case is an IFO or information only, it still takes a good hour, or 2 hours, for one case. So yeah. I think I would change that for certain IFOs that are, especially the SpaceX launches we have now, or Jan Harzan was talking a little bit about the Starlink satellites. We get a lot of reports on that right now.
I will actually be asking Ruben Uriarte about that later, and of course Marc D'Antonio on the Starlink topic. But so we'll hold off on that Starlink topic until after we're done with this cataloging topic subject matter. But want to bring in Marc D'Antonio and ask you, and then Shane Hurd, of course, what would you do regarding the cataloging of the UFO topic? Would you do anything different, or stick with the tried and true tactic?
Well, what we did is we have a number of for instance, identifications and dispositions, as we call them, in CMS, the case management system. And when I'm doing photo or video analysis, I try to, shoehorn, if they fit, some of these objects into the given classifications as given in CMS. But sometimes it's not that easy. So there's one called other, and then you explain it in the case, for instance, in the disposition. But one of the things that I think is needed, which has really never been addressed, I don't believe, is the technical aptitude, technical aptitude of the people making the reports, that is the witness. Now, I think you have to be careful with that, because you don't want to have categories like dummy, smarter than normal dummy. I mean, you don't want that kind of thing, obviously, but you do want to have some type of understanding of whether the person has any kind of an understanding of what you're looking at in the sky. And to give you an idea, okay, for instance, when you have, I got 2 cases in the last 2 days, and they both had out of focus images of the planet Venus. Now, when Venus sets, it's pretty dramatic. It makes these really cool flashes on the horizon, and in a camera, they can look rainbowy colors. It's really pretty. And one of the guys sent me a video of this and said, look, this is Venus. And I said, well, look, here, I have an observatory that I run, and here's a picture of Venus that we took tonight, same night that you took that. And I showed him the crescent of Venus. You can actually see the shape, the moon-like phase of Venus. Okay, same thing with Mercury. You can do the same. Well, any planet closer to the sun, you can see that. Well, I showed him that with Venus, and he goes, that's not Venus. You don't know what you're talking about. Now, his technical aptitude with a camera was, if you had to measure it from 0 to 10, it was probably a 1.5. But the problem is he thinks his aptitude's a 7.5. So you have to kind of, you have to judge people's technical aptitude as well. And when he said the kind of camera, I knew that he couldn't focus on a star with that kind of camera. It didn't work for that. The P900 Nikon doesn't see stars, for instance. It can't. I mean, it can, but it can't focus on them well. Anyway, so we have to have a way of measuring the technical aptitude of the people that are making these reports. Even if it's just based on the way they relay the data, there has to be some type of category to say whether this person is knowledgeable, what's this person's background, are they capable of making the statements they're making, and in other words, are they believable? And so then it actually becomes easier to understand what they might have seen. Because if you know that the guy making the call in the case is, say, an astronomer, okay, then I would say, okay, well, then obviously this guy knows astronomy. He knows what Venus is, and it'd be insulting to say what you think is Venus. And we get a lot of reports where people say, I'm not stupid. I know what Venus looks like. Okay, sometimes they're right, but sometimes they're not. And it's, again, that case where they think they know more than they do. So it's a fine line, but we have to have a way of measuring that, even if internally, so that we can make a better judgment as to what they may have seen.
Okay, I want to bring up something important, and actually nearly everybody on the show is with us when we did this MUFON boot camp special show, where we talked about a person who might have an investigator might accompany another newbie investigator into a UFO-related investigation. Where I'm going with this is, do we also need to add in that there was a veteran, a UFO investigator, and a newbie investigator involved? Should that be a subcategory in a report, behind the scenes, so to speak, so it doesn't show up in a public case? The MUFON cases that people can search publicly, but behind the scenes, in the more private part of the database, should that be a subcategory? Mark?
Personal feeling, I think so. And I know you're addressing everybody, but
yeah.
I'll just say I think it should be something that's stated, because you don't know when you read a case. Sometimes you get the enthusiasm of a younger, fresh field investigator who just wants to see UFOs everywhere they look, and it takes some time to refine that eye, to understand that they're very elusive. So.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so very much. I appreciate that.
Chant.
Yes.
Ruben, I just wanted to say real briefly, in our CMS, we do have primary investigator, and then we do have secondary investigator. So that's where we may have two people working on the case. Of course, one a veteran and the other is a newbie, but that is indicated.
That's great to know. And please.
This is Earl here for just a second. Hey, Earl. Yeah. Hello. So, I was going to elaborate a little bit on what Ruben was saying. For every single case, it has to be okayed by the state director or the chief investigator. So there's always a veteran ufologist on every case. So if it's a newbie and they get excited, over a Mylar balloon spinning in the wind, reflecting the sun back, which is probably about 40% of the UFO reports I get in, I'll send it back to them. I'll tell them, no, you need to redo this, and you need to become more acquainted with what a Mylar balloon looks like in the wind and wind currents. You look up the wind currents. You can do that on Weather Underground if you have an exact time, and So I mean, I think there is sort of a. There is a twofold investigation going on there already.
Okay, great. And I just want to tell everybody, I encourage you to interrupt me, because this show is about you. So please do interrupt me whenever you feel it's pertinent.
Okay, this is Jan Aldrich. Let me interrupt you right here.
Yes, go ahead.
What you're saying here is what you're doing is the cases you investigate now, you're going to be able to put them in the CMS. Okay? I'm talking about 100,000 cases I'm scanning. I am using a one-line convention, which gives you the date, location, type of sighting, DDCCE1 or something like that. If there's something peculiar about the case, you can put a one-word thing in there. The witness and the origin of the material, and you maybe be able to put a few other words in there. Greenwood has gone through the Brazilian National Archives, and he's not finished yet. He's just starting. He's got 5,000 cases. I can't put 5,000 cases in the CMS. I don't have enough lifespan left. He's just gone through the Swedish newspapers that are up there for. There's about 12 newspapers that are up there for a month. He has over 3,000 cases already established. This is after getting rid of the dross and stuff. You got to think about this. It's great if you investigate a dozen cases a year to try to put the stuff in the CMS. But if you're doing thousands of cases, you got to figure we don't live that long.
Okay, that's a very, very valid point. And I think Shane Hurd wanted to ask him his insight on this topic also. I think you might have been mentioning earlier, Shane, what was it that you were talking about? A technical aptitude of the witnesses. That was Mark. And then you want to know if they've seen UFOs or paranormal before. That's interesting. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, I was going to say this is along the lines of both what Mark and Jan are talking about, and where I'll get there at the end is really the credibility of the witness. But let me start with, obviously with the database, you have tables of information that contain metadata. So let's just say one table is, contact information, and you have name, address, phone number, email, blah, blah, blah. All those things are searchable You can report on those things because they're part of that table. And that's non-subjective data. It's just black and white. The problem is when it comes down to an investigation, you do have a lot of subjective data, and you want to eliminate the subjectivity as much as possible. But frankly, when you're dealing with human beings, that's not going to happen. And so some of the questions I ask in my investigations, there's not a searchable field in the CMS for them, but I always ask the question, and I put the information in the non-searchable text fields. So, for example, every person I ask, what was it about your sighting that makes you feel this was not something prosaic like a planet or an airplane? And I think that it's a very interesting thing to get a response on that, and then it does speak sort of to the person's credibility. We all know that the eyewitness testimony is one of the most important things in a case, but on the same hand, it can be very unreliable. So you do have to sort of size up or determine the credibility of the person making the report. And so another thought I had too was, have you ever had a paranormal experience or seen a UFO prior to making this report? Because that does suggest some other things, another line of questioning that you might want to employ. So again, I like the CMS the way it's set up. It's wonderful. I think it could be expanded to, include some of the less or the more subjective stuff, because even though you can't nail it down and say black or white, it does suggest some things that are important to the investigation.
Well, we appreciate that, and thank you for the valuable input, including the rooster as well.
Sorry, that guy's got to go.
That's hilarious. Does he wake you up in the morning?
Oh, yeah. All day, all night.
That's very funny.
He's on the short list, let me tell you.
That's great. He's dinner. Okay, I wanted to bring on Michael Hall. And he's known as a paranormal lawyer. He's an attorney, a doctor of jurisprudence, and a former Superior Court judge pro tem. I wanted to just give a little bit of background regarding Michael. He's got a fascinating history as an experienced UFO field investigator for APRO, the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization. He's a longtime consultant to MUFON since 1995, the attorney of record for the National UFO Reporting Center. And Peter Davenport knows him very well. And the National Aviation Reporting Center on Anomalous Phenomena, NARCAP, 1999, an experiencer himself. And he's also represented such noted ufologists such as Grant Cameron, Chief Petty Officer Kevin Day, Peter Davenport, Dr. Richard Haynes, and Dr. James Harder. He also is good friends with Dr. Richard Haynes, just mentioned him. We would love to have him on the show, Michael, if you ever feel like you're in a position to ask him. Anyway, Michael, wanted to ask you, you have your own UFOI team. You go out in the field, just like the rest of the folks here do or have done. Any tips or insight on how to improve the UFO cataloging effort?
Well, yes. Thank you, Chant, by the way, for inviting me to be on this August panel today. This is fantastic. We've got ufologists from around the world here chewing on an interesting, important topic. I think my client and longtime friend Peter Davenport would agree with me that what we need to also concentrate on is getting all those reports that are unreported. In reality, Peter, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard him say that probably 1 in 20,000 actual UFO sightings are ever reported anywhere. Peter, I'll let you jump in here with me if you want to corroborate that.
You're correct, Michael. You quote me correctly. It's somewhere, I estimate that out of somewhere between 10,000 and 20,000 sightings of legitimate, authentic UFOs, only one of them is ever captured in any UFO organization. People are just hesitant to report it. They're lazy, and many times they just put it off until it disappears in the recesses of their memories.
Yes, exactly. And we've, Peter, you and I, dealt with this for almost 30 years now that I've been involved with you at the National UFO Reporting Center, in the fact that, the baby boomers out there, the largest influx of souls on the planet, are not that technically expertise. Let's say, if, for instance, they need to go to a website or even do something on their phone. So in reality, what we've done with the National UFO Reporting Center is make sure that the hotline phone number for reporting UFOs to Newfork, which is 206-722-3000, that hotline phone number is in every FAA tower in the United States, civilian, military, and commercial, as well as all the law enforcement agencies around the planet. And I'm talking local law enforcement agencies that you can go to in your small hometown and or, federal wise as well. So I think it's important for all of us in these organizations that we belong to make ourselves accessible to people somehow that maybe even don't even have the technical expertise to fill out a reporting form on the internet, for instance.
Okay, that's fantastic. And just wanted to ask you, Michael, if folks wanted to find out more about your wonderful UFOI team, how did they do that? And can you mention that you're on Spaced Out Radio also? You have a wonderful show going on there. You actually have two shows, to my understanding. You do your own show live, and then you also have that show as well. I've seen you do both. Can you please explain a little bit about that before we move on to the next topic?
Oh, thank you, Chant. Yeah, well, tonight, by the way, is my my Sunday night show on Spaced Out Radio. So I appreciate you mentioning that. We literally have an audience worldwide. Dave Scott is the station manager and director and weekday host, and has brought me on board for Sunday evenings on Spaced Out Sunday. So you can join us on Spreaker or any kind of app that you've got. The UFOI team, I would love to have people join us on our Monday nights weekly meetings over Zoom. Literally, we used to, meet at Denny's live, out here in the Pacific Northwest in Linwood, Washington on Monday nights. But, of course, the lockdown has prevented us from doing so. But literally, it's provided us an opportunity over Zoom Monday evening, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, to invite the world to tell us their story. That's our motto at the UFOI team. And literally people now, ever since the New York Times article came out, December 16th of 2017, people are now feeling vindicated to be able to come out and tell us their sighting stories personally right over the internet on Zoom. So thank you for allowing us to invite folks to join us.
That's great. And also want to mention something very, very important, and that is our listeners need to know how to contact Peter Davenport if they have a UFO report to make. Peter, do you mind chiming in and letting us know how one would actually contact you, and what do they do once they call you?
Yeah, thank you, Chant, for asking. Michael gave out the hotline number, 206-722-3000. But I frankly prefer to have go directly to the online reporting form on our website, which is ufocenter.com. And for those folks down in Australia, we spell center a little bit strangely. We spell it C-E-N-T-E-R. So that's the best way to get to us. And while I'm talking here, I'd like to make just a short editorial comment if we have enough time. A global comment about ufology in general. We've somehow got to graduate beyond eyewitness accounts and fuzzy photographs to be able to bring what we believe is happening to the American people and around the world. I'd invite people, if they're not familiar with my proposal, I know Jan is, at least Jan Harzan, that is, familiar with my proposal for using so-called passive radar for detecting UFOs. It is within our technical ability today to be able to build a system to detect UFOs directly by reflected radio and television signals. All we need is financing. And I invite anybody who's interested in the subject who hasn't yet read my paper to do so. It's posted to my website, ufocenter.com. And all we need is funding. We have an engineering team assembled, and the concept is not a new one. The first application for passive radar for a patent in that field is from England in 1927. So we can do it, and it will allow us to graduate from where we are to where we'd like to be.
That's fantastic, Peter. Thank you so very much for sharing that vital information for all of us to become more educated about. And I hope that people are encouraged by that to actually call him if they have a UFO report to make. And Peter, how long have you had your UFO reporting center? Can you please share that?
Well, it was founded in 1974 by Robert J. Gribble, a retired Seattle fireman. He turned it over to me in 1994, July of 94, so I'm coming up on 26 years of running the UFO hotline.
Oh, well, like everybody on this panel, you have contributed an immensely invaluable service to the entire world regarding the UFO topic and more. So we're very grateful to you for that great benefit, and thank you so much for your great service.
You're welcome. Thanks for commenting. And I may have said 24 years. I should have said 26 years.
Wow, that is so wonderful, and we appreciate all the time you've invested, an immense amount of time. We are all better for it. I wanted to mention a few topics that we're going to be bringing up, and that is Dr. Irena Scott will review a short bio from her perspective regarding her very close friendship with the late Jennie R. Zeidman. And I'll go ahead and go over that in a moment. But I wanted to bring up an interesting topic, and this is something very funny, Marc D'Antonio wanted to mention to you that happened when you were on a panel with us before regarding a certain topic I brought up, and you were really fascinating when you were talking about it. But I wanted to bring up something interesting. You had very little time to be with us on that show. You spent as much time as you possibly could. You'll know what show I'm talking about in just a moment. And when you left, Dr. Irena actually promptly brought up a really fantastic point that I wanted both of you to discuss if you have the opportunity to do so. And that is, there is a Professor Chandra, and Marc, you'll have to actually correct me how to say this. It's Chandra, what is that, Marc?
Wickramasinghe.
Okay, I can't say that. There's no way. I'm gonna have to rely on you for that.
Song, it'll be Wickramasinghe, make it easier.
Wickramasinghe. Okay, Professor Chandra Wickramasinghe, the Buckingham Center for Astrobiology. I'm going to go ahead and quote him. He said the sudden outbreak of a new coronavirus is very likely to have a space connection. The strong localization of the virus within China is the most remarkable aspect of this disease. In October last year, a fragment of a comet exploded in brief flash northeast China, as the news there. And he said, we think it probable this contained embedded within it a monoculture of infective 2019 nCoV virus particles that survived in the interior of the incandescent meteor. He goes on to say, we consider the seemingly outrageous possibility that hundreds of trillions of infective viral particles were then released, embedded in the form of fine carbonaceous dust. Then he goes on to finish, we believe infectious agents are prevalent in space, carried on comets, and can fall towards Earth through the troposphere. Now, when you went over all of that interesting data that this professor felt that he had insight to share on, and then left the show, and Dr. Irena Scott brought up a brilliant point, and I wanted Dr. Irena Scott to hone in on this, and then perhaps you can chime in on it, Marc. And that is, she said, if there was RNA data to be had, that would be key. Dr. Irena Scott, can you please share a little bit more with us on that perspective regarding RNA data and that pandemic by meteoroid topic that Professor Chandra Wickramasinghe mentioned?
Well, the coronavirus has complicated RNA organic molecules. Insofar as known of meteorites, they found organic molecules, and they possibly found ribose, but they haven't found anything so far, such as RNA or DNA. That's a order of magnitudes greater in complexity than what they found. And if they did find RNA or DNA in a meteorite, it would be newsworthy all over the world because it might suggest that there's life in the universe just like ours. I think it's possible that there is RNA in the universe, but I don't think they've ever found that in a meteorite yet. And so
I don't think so.
And so, if it came in if something was causing the coronavirus from a meteorite, that would be a specific RNA for the coronavirus that would come in on a meteorite. And that's just probably not something that there'd be a lot of chance against that.
I actually tend to agree with that. And now, when Wickramasinghe said that there was a small comet that exploded, I think he really should have said a small meteor, because we haven't been hit by any comets since possibly Tunguska. And that was in early 1900s, and that is the only one we know of in historical modern history, actually. So as far as the fireball that came in, let's say it was a space rock. We know that space rocks have fallen to Earth that have amino acids in them. The Murchison meteorite had amino acids. And I believe that those are obviously part of the building blocks of life, sure. And clearly they're made on the Earth, they're made on other planets, certainly. But as Dr. Scott says, we don't have any evidence that we're getting deoxyribonucleic acid or DNA, right? We haven't seen that yet. Not a variant of it anyway. DNA strands are different for all the species, right? So there are similarities to a certain percentage. Above that makes that species unique to its own little niche, right? So right now, as far as I can tell, it was a meteor that struck over China, just like the Chelyabinsk meteor that turned night into day, blew off security doors, and injured lots of people up in Russia earlier. So I don't think that this fireball and corona are linked in any way, because I think that's sort of spitballing as far as I'm concerned. I don't think he was particularly saying that he believes that's what this is. I think he's saying we can't rule out the possibility, and that's scientifically a valid thing to say. But I don't think we can rule it out, but there is a chance, and it merits being looked at, because there could be a time in the future when we will get a pathogen from space.
Okay, wonderful. And Dr. Irena Scott, did you have any more to talk about on that topic?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the Earth has been here for like 4 billion years, and there might have been something drifting in caused panspermia or something. But yeah. As far as the coronavirus, I think it's against probability. There isn't much probability that could have happened. That the specific RNA for coronavirus that would come in on a meteor.
This is Earl again. So when I was looking at the name of the Indian gentleman, who I'm not going to try to pronounce, but he was. When it was talking about the theory, it had his name / Hoyle. And I believe that's Dr. Frederick Hoyle, who was the guy who proposed panspermia in the first place.
It was, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that perhaps this gentleman is sort of quick to presuppose, because since he, was working with Frederick Hoyle, that's where his mind is going,
I understand that thought, yeah.
But I mean, panspermia is a very good possibility of how life, erupts throughout the cosmos. But
sure.
It has not been proven, though. It's a theory,
That's correct. But we do know that, as I said, that we do have meteor falls here on the planet that did bring amino acids from elsewhere to the planet. So there is some evidence that building blocks of life have been delivered here. Actually, there's copious evidence, comets and meteor strikes from Murchison on, and the inevitable asteroid strike from the past could have delivered the building blocks. I don't think they delivered live pathogens, as Dr. Scott also, I think, agrees. It's a it's worth mentioning because it could happen maybe someday, but I don't think we're at that point. I don't think it's ever really happened here, but we have enough ultraviolet radiation from the sun to cause many mutations in our DNA throughout time, which may very well be the reason why we have so many different and varied species on our planet. Maybe it's because this mutation followed by adaptation, which is evolution, is something triggered by a sun that's very active in the ultraviolet region, and ours actually is.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for that valuable insight. I also wanted to ask Roger, I believe. Roger, you're a scientist. Can you please explain what you do, and if you have anything you want to say about this topic?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting topic, and I did read up on it last night, actually. I'm a neuroscientist, so I'm now a teacher, but I used to run a neuroscience lab at the University of Sydney, and one of my specialities was Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease, which we used to obtain brains from people who had Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease, and we had to diagnose it. And as some of you may know, prions are proteins that are infectious, like viruses and bacteria. It's the only known thing other than a virus and a bacteria that's infectious. It's quite unusual because these proteins are found normally in the brain, and they misfold and they recruit other proteins to form an infection in the brain that causes holes in the brain, literally. And I did get on to Dr. Wickrama Singh last night, and he emailed me, funnily enough, and he said, because what I had a problem with was if some DNA or an RNA is transported via a meteorite or a comet, more likely a comet because you find water on comets, how does it survive re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere, because there's a lot of heat generated, etc. And he responded by saying, as you know, smaller disintegrating fragments of a bolide that eventually end up as a fireball are released non-destructively into the mesosphere. So he's saying that basically these viruses can be released in the troposphere, which is still quite high up, I should imagine, from the Earth's atmosphere, and they settle down onto Earth prior to the actual meteorite or comet hitting the Earth and then breaking up and generating all that heat. So he's saying that there is a possibility of panspermia to happen in this way, but also it brings up the concept of, if you do find RNA or DNA on meteorites and comets, well, where did it come from? How did it originate? Did it originate on Earth, or did RNA and DNA originate on Earth, or was it brought here via panspermia from another solar system? And if it did, well, how did it originate in that solar system? It's quite an interesting concept, but something that really can't be answered at the moment. And it takes us back to how life originated on Earth. How prokaryotic organisms originated on Earth. Prokaryotes eukaryotes are cells that have a nucleus and have DNA in them, where prokaryotes don't have a nucleus. They've got DNA or RNA, but they have it floating around the cytoplasm. So it's interesting. There's some theories that say that the DNA or RNA could have come from panspermia and then entered into cells like prokaryotes that we have here on Earth, that evolved here on Earth. So I think it's an interesting topic, and he has written quite a few papers. I've read a couple of his papers. I don't believe it. At the moment, there's not enough evidence to say that RNA is transported and DNA is transported by, as Dr. Irena Scott is saying. They have detected things like polycyclic hydrocarbons and also, so let me just have a look and see if I pronounced that correctly. I don't think I have, but you can get amino acids and complex carbon-based organic molecules on meteorites and comets.
Oh, absolutely, actually.
Yeah. And also formaldehyde is found in interstellar space, which is a preservative that we use to preserve tissue or proteins in tissue. So that's interesting that formaldehyde is actually, it's a gas, it's found in interstellar space, but it's also sort of like an organic molecule which can be built upon to form these polycyclic hydrocarbons that are found in meteorites and things.
There's another theory too, if I can just throw that in.
We want to hear from you because we know you have to go. So please do. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. There's another theory too, and thank you. That was actually very interesting because Wickramasinghe is someone that I've paid attention to as well. One of the things I wanted to mention was that the whole panspermia concept, it doesn't necessarily have to leave our solar system to have the origin found. Okay, one of the early thoughts is that the early planet Mars had a much thicker atmosphere, had a lot of running water, potentially had life, and when it suffered an impact, some of that atmosphere and material would be blown out into space, inevitably possibly reaching the Earth as a meteorite. We have seen in the Antarctic, we've been able to identify Martian meteorites. So it's possible that early life from Mars marched its way here through an impact. And that's another theory. So panspermia doesn't have to be extraterrestrial other than being within our solar system and the existing planets early in their history.
Thank you. I just wanted to interject before anybody says anything. I apologize. Just hold on to that thought and please do ask it or make that point. Mark, if you do have to leave, I just want to let everybody know a little bit about you. Marc D'Antonio, who is a very well-known astronomer. Millions of people around the world listen to his show. I believe it's called Skywatch, but he will go ahead and let us know everything regarding when do we see his show, what the full name of it is, and just want to let our listeners know he has a degree in astronomy and is the Mutual UFO Network's chief video photo forensic analyst. He is CEO of FX Models, a model making and special effects company specializing in digital physical models and organic special effects in the film industry. He's done extensive work in the film and television arena, appearing regularly on a number of networks, and his efforts creating UFO TOG2, a remote UFO detection system with Douglas Trumbull, promises to bring ufology into the 21st century. Mark, can you please share with us what the name of your show is, when people can watch it, and how do they do that?
Sure. I mean, and thank you for that, Jan. And it was nice to be here. And I'm sorry I have to run off, but I do have an appointment that's pending right in the moment. This radio show was on Sunday nights from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And it's called Sky Tour Radio. And then on YouTube, we have a channel that's tied to our observatory. We have one observatory now in northwestern Connecticut, and we have another one that we're building in the Sonoran Desert in Arizona. And both will be online by, the one in the Sonoran will be online by the summer, early summer, actually. And so that's called Sky Tour Livestream, and that's on YouTube. And if you look up Sky Tour Livestream, you'll find it. Subscribe, hit the bell, get notified, come along on nights. It's all free. And Sky Tour Radio on kgraradio.com. Of course, you can listen to it on TalkStream Live and other online services. Thanks.
That's fantastic, and we appreciate your time today. I know you have very short amount of time anyway because you're extremely busy, so we appreciate your discretionary time today, Mark.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody that I apologize for having interrupted you. Can you please continue your point? And then I want to bring in a point that Shane Hurd has made, and also a point that Ruben Uriarte has made also to me on the side. So please do make up the point. Make the point you were making prior. I apologize to my interruption.
Go
ahead.
Okay, this is Ruben. Thank you. And that's a really fascinating topic, possibility of viruses being brought in from comets and that. And I just began thinking, what about crash retrievals? There's always that possibility of people being exposed, or search and rescue teams that may go and start investigating and retrieving a crash, and then they potentially may be exposed or have been exposed to some sort of pathogen. So that I was just thinking about that, and also some of the cases that have been presented. Whether there's actual proof, that's another story. But I began thinking about that. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention too. Peter Davenport brought up a really good point, and I saw that his presentation at one of the MUFON symposiums on his project, the pulse, or the on the radar that he was passive radar, and I thought that was fascinating. I would really love to see that get funded. So I definitely support it.
Thank you for the comment. This is Peter. I think that was the 2004 symposium in Denver, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's right. Yes, that's correct.
And then I appeared before the board of directors and state directors in, I think it was July of 2008. Am I correct, Jan? Jan may not be here, Jan Harzan. Made a pitch before the state directors and the board of directors in July of 2008 for a joint project between all UFO organizations. If we can build a prototype, we can cover the North American continent with as few as 3 stations, I estimate. And we can monitor UFO activity directly and on a real-time basis. That's exactly what the U.S. Navy did with its naval space surveillance system that used to be in operation in the southern United States.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for that input. And also Shane had an interesting point I know he wanted to bring up. Do you still want to make that point, Shane, regarding what would constitute proof of a pathogen that may have been delivered by a meteor or comet? That's a good question. What does constitute proof? Did you still have that question, Shane?
Yeah, I was hoping Mark could chime in. But certainly Dr. Scott and Roger as well. And just my thought is there are so many theories out there. This might be a viable theory, but how would you know? How could you prove that a pathogen came from that source?
Would be very difficult or impossible.
That was Peter talking. And Dr. Irena Scott or Roger Stankovic, did you have any input you want to share on that very interesting point that Shane just made?
About how would you prove that a virus came on a meteorite? Is that what the question was?
Is that correct, Shane?
Yeah, that's it.
Well, it would be almost impossible because one said, I suppose if you picked up a fragment of the meteorite or the comet or whatever, if you tested it, it's already hit the Earth's atmosphere, it's already hit the ground, etc. It'd be contaminated by bacteria and viruses on Earth. So there's no real way of testing it apart from, I suppose, sampling the troposphere to see whether there's DNA or RNA up there. I don't know whether anyone's done that, but there could be, fragments of DNA or RNA already up in that atmosphere that's come off a meteorite that's come within close proximity to Earth. I don't know how you possibly test that.
Okay. And Dr. Irena Scott, did you want to bring up any information on or insight on that topic you brought up?
Well, if you had a meteorite that just fell and you were able to absolutely confirm that a particular organic compound was in that meteorite, you could. But that would be very difficult because they can't always tell whether it's contamination or not. And then if you found DNA in the atmosphere, well, it'd probably be our own DNA. It wouldn't it wouldn't necessarily be from any place else unless it was a completely different type of molecule than what we have of the 4 components of the DNA. So I think it would be, but you could prove it. I mean, if you found a meteorite and you're absolutely sure that it wasn't contaminated and it had a particular RNA or DNA, you could show that. But I don't think it's ever been done.
Great, thank you. That was a great point, Shane, and also Ruben Uriarte. Thank you very much for bringing up those interesting points. I wanted to talk to Dr. Irena Scott very briefly because we're pressed for time on a really wonderful icon in the UFO community. I believe she passed away early April. She may have to correct me on the date, but I believe it was April 8th of this year. And Dr. Irena Scott was very close friends with Jennie Zeidman, and I know Michael Hall and possibly Peter Davenport have heard of her. She wrote extensively on the UFO topic, and wanted to mention just a little bit about her. She was, Jennie Zeidman was Dr. J. Allen Hynek's private secretary and author of multiple UFO-related books. She was considered a serious investigator of the UFO topic. If you want to learn a little bit more about what she wrote about, you can actually look up Isaac Coy. He actually collected quite a bit of data that she actually took the time to write on. And she dedicated her life to that, the UFO topic. And also, I believe it was Stephen Bassett and his Paradigm Research Center. He had some really fantastic info on her also. So it would be www.paradigmresearchgroup.org. He has a great bibliography on her. And then also Isaac Coy, if you look him up, he has a fantastic list of books that she wrote, including other details of her life. Dr. Irena Scott, you actually said something really wonderful about her. I'm going to go ahead and read to everybody what it was. She said, she was about the first ufologist I met. She helped me in many ways and furnished a lot of the material for my last book. This included Dr. J. Allen Hynek's handwritten letters and much material and information from the Battelle SR-14 study that gave a super idea of what went on, and much more from Blue Book and elsewhere. She worked for Dr. Hynek at Ohio State University, Battelle Memorial Institute, and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base's Project Blue Book. She worked at all these institutions, was a writer and investigator. She let me use many photos of ufologists and also of Dr. Hynek. She will be really missed. I think she had been on the board of directors of both QFOS and MUFON. She was a pilot and solved one of Dr. Hynek's cases that impressed him, and he hired her. She spent many years researching UFOs. Then Dr. Scott goes on to say, much of the material in my last book came from her. Sacred Corridors, Secrets Behind the Real Project Blue Book, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Roswell, Battelle, Memory, Metal, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, and UFO Cover-Ups. If you want to find out more about those wonderful books that Dr. Irena Scott wrote, which I myself have actually bought one recently, and it's just wonderful reading, you go to Amazon and you can just Google Dr. Irena Scott and then type in Amazon and UFO, and all of her books will pop up. Now, Dr. Irena Scott, I want to tell you something very personal, and that is, I've seen a lot in my lifetime. I've been through breast cancer twice, and I have actually seen also in my lifetime an awful lot of sexism. I've seen women treated very badly because they were women. Now, I think to say that Jennie Zeidman was Dr. J. Allen Hynek's private secretary marginalizes her regarding all the extensive effort and wherewithal she put forward toward the UFO topic. And I think it's important that we emphasize how great she really was. Can you please touch on that topic, Dr. Irena Scott?
I don't think she was his private secretary. I think she started out as his research associate. He was teaching astronomy at OSU, and he was impressed by her ability to solve a problem that he had. He would discuss his UFO cases in class, and she solved one of them, and he hired her. But she worked for Battelle and for Wright-Patterson Project Blue Book, and Ohio State University in the astronomy department. She worked for all three, and she investigated UFOs as her own self, not as his secretary. When she was working for him, one of her jobs was to go through the UFO cases that they had selected for Blue Book, and she selected the ones that she thought were interesting that he ought to look into more detail, and that was one of her things. But she was actually being paid by the Air Force, and a lot of my book came from the Project Blue Book Special Report number 14, and that was done by Battelle back in 1952, and it was it was probably the top scientific work that's ever been done on UFOs. And back in 1952, they put the information for Project Blue Book on computers. I mean, way back then, and they used cards and all that, and did a study. And not only did they do things like finding out what portions are astronomical and all that, but they also did a study to find out if UFOs were real. And they did a statistical study using, they had about 13,000 cases, and they culled that down to about 3,000, and did a statistical study there where they used a control group of UFO reports that were identified later compared to UFO reports that were never identified. And they came out with a very highly significant difference in them, which would highly suggest that UFOs are real. And so they went one step further of just analyzing, where they were and what they were and the shape and things like that. They did an actual statistical study with chi-squared, comparing two control group and a real group of UFOs and finding statistical differences. And they got about 1 chance in a billion that against the idea that UFOs are prosaic objects. And they even suggested further studies, but this was about the highest level study that's been done on UFOs ever. It'd be very hard for a private organization to do that because the government did it because they had money. And so I used a lot of the information she had directly from Battelle on that, and she went into a lot of work studying it and interviewed the people that did the study that she could find and that sort of thing too, and got their opinions. It was top secret too. I mean, Project Blue Book was sort of a debunking thing for the public, but it showed that they were actually interested in what UFOs were. And the only reason anybody found out about the secret study was because of a whistleblower. And she never found out who the whistleblower was.
That is fabulous, and thank you so very much for having corrected me on that. I wanted to mention something interesting, and that is that Jennie Zeidman was actually mentioned in a book called UFO Secrets Inside Wright-Patterson, Eyewitness Accounts from the Rural Area 51 by Thomas J. Carey, I believe it says, and Donald R. Schmidt. I'm trying to read 1-point font there, so forgive me. I think that is the gentleman's name, Thomas J. Carey. In a paragraph in that book, it actually says, I'll go ahead and read the paragraph. The last known meeting between General Weinbrenner and Hynek also included Colonel Robert Friend, a former head of Project Blue Book. The appointment took place in early 1974. After a heated exchange, Hynek stormed out of the room yelling, "Patsies, patsies, they're trying to make us all patsies all over again." His private secretary, Jennie Zeidman, was waiting for him as he entered her car. He was clearly upset, and it was a long, tense drive back to Illinois. Hynek did not say a word. Well, what is your input on that, right there regarding her being labeled a private secretary. Also wanted to mention to you, I noticed my repeated efforts to do research on her would bring up that title. Can you please fill us in on that? And thank you for correcting me.
Well, I think she was a research associate. She was at Ohio State. I don't think she was a private secretary.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for setting the record straight.
Can I jump in here?
Yes, please.
Jan Aldrich, Dr. Scott. So in Kufos's files, there's some material about Battelle and also Special Report 14. And of course, in 1953, Hynek and Jeannie were working on something called Project Henry. Have you heard of that?
I can't think of it right now.
Okay. Well, anyways, I'm fascinated by the fact that you say you have that she kept a lot of his handwritten correspondence. Is there any chance that might be scanned or available at some time?
It's in my book. I printed
all the correspondence is in there. I thought there was extensive.
What she gave me.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Battelle is really interesting. Ruppelt tries to take credit for being the instigator, but it was actually the whole thing with Battelle was actually in 1950, before they even got Ruppelt into Project Blue Book. It was already proposed by General Garland. He already wanted this study done. So it's interesting, the number of people that try to get in there and say, I was responsible for this. But yeah, it's historically there's a lot of stuff that has not yet come out. And
yeah, I mean, on the Pinnacle Memorandum, the person that's listed first is the president of Battelle. And he's the one that accepted the study from Project Blue Book, which,
right.
That was his Battelle's reputation right there. And he accepted the study. It was to be top secret, but he was interested. And Jennie interviewed people to find out what his opinion on things were. And he was very interested in the project and thought they might be able to find something. So,
yeah, right.
And he was.
Yeah, please.
I think he was the president of Battelle when the 1947 Roswell event occurred.
Yeah, one thing that Hynek said that Battelle took, they got copies of not only Project Blue Book stuff, but civilians that wrote in. Especially after Life magazine, they got they had several hundred items that both Life magazine and Civilian Saucer Intelligence in Los Angeles and Life magazine and Blue Book got, and they took some of those letters when they made the study. So it wasn't just Project Blue Book stuff. But Hynek said, after they finished the study, they destroyed all the raw data. And unfortunately, some of that raw data was only in one copy. And so stuff was lost there. It's one of the many times that stuff was lost from Project Blue Book. Battelle's interest in there and contract is, I say, comparable to the contract with Bigelow. They're both very interesting.
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned that topic, Jan. We're going to go and move on to that topic. Jim Kerr could not be with us today. He is a investigator of the UFO topic. He actually forensically analyzes video and photo, and we were ready for him, but he had to back out at the last minute due to a personal emergency. Wanted to mention a really fascinating topic that Jan brought to my attention. I'm going to read what he said, and then I'm hoping that Jan will go ahead and start the topic and people can chime in on it. I'll go ahead and start. It says on the topic of AATIP/Bigelow, BASS, BASS. First and foremost, the government can't tell the truth involving UFOs or whatever they want to call them, and their involvement with them. Second, Elizondo is basically a soft shoe dancer. His answers are full of evasions and obfuscations. It is unclear what Bigelow and his company actually investigated involving his contract. Was Skinwalker Ranch part of the government business or just a side investigation? Bigelow is under no obligation to explain his involvement. As I have pointed out before, probably the wrong questions are being asked. Everyone in the military has a boss. What entity, parentheses, entities, end of parentheses, did AATIP and AAWSAP report to in the chain of command or their staff supervision? Number 2, Elizondo contention that AATIP was never told to stand down seems quite unlikely. What allowed them to continue? 3, Elizondo claimed that incidents came to him already investigated and vetted. What entities were involved here investigating such report? Number 4, Elizondo claimed funding post-DIA came for other departments or agencies, which seems this should be subject to some kind of audit. I don't expect any answers to these questions in the next decade. What I expect are further outright lies, evasions, and obfuscations. I wanted to mention, that was the end of the quote, that he's talking about Lou Elizondo. Jan, can you please let us know what you were touching upon there? Explain a little bit.
Well, the first thing about the government is, of course, a quote from Barry Greenwood. The government can't tell the truth about UFOs and their... and we said that in UFOs in Government, the book by Michael Swords and William Powell and the rest of us hangers-on. We said that. And, of course, the British got very upset about that. Oh, you can't say that about government servants and stuff like that. We can and we do. And as far as being able to tell the truth, let's go back to Battelle. When they issued Project Blue Special Report 14th, the Secretary of the Air Force outright lied. He said that in a few years we will have vehicles that will behave like UFOs do, and he was referring to the Avro car. And anybody that's seen a film of the Avro car, I saw one where it tried to take off and went into a ditch out at Wright-Patterson. So it's a real joke. The Secretary of the Air Force was outright lying to the press right there. As far as Elizondo is, he is an intelligence official. He has a very interesting career, and he's it's like you say, thank you for your service. But I believe he is not being at all candid whenever he talks about his role and AATIP and anything else. And I know my friend interviewed him, and a lot of things were, this is classified, that's classified, this is classified. And of course, the article in the New York Times said, no, almost everything is unclassified. So what do we have here? We have a real, something there that needs to be resolved. As far as I've always been interested in where AATIP and the other organization fit in. where is on the wire diagram of the Defense Intelligence Agency exactly who's the boss? Who do they report to? That's unclear, and that to me, having 25 years in the military, it's important to figure out who's interacting with who. He did say that AATIP was 100% UFOs, and of course the government says didn't have anything to do with UFOs. So there's another thing that needs to be resolved.
Okay, I just wanted to interject here. Thank you for clearing up that statement you made. I wanted to just say something about the Lou Elizondo topic, and that is, I think it's very naive for all of us to think that the UFO topic was only attributed to a project with money to back it up for 5 to 7 years. That's very naive for anybody to believe that that's the only allotted time that the U.S. government would have actually studied anything traversing the skies. That is an unknown. Now, Frank, can you do me a favor and just mute your mic? Thank you. The other thing I wanted to mention is anything that traverses the skies around the world, any government, whether it be first or third world governments, are going to want to monitor it. And so for anybody to believe that the Pentagon had a UFO-related program for only a few years is it's unreasonable and it's unrealistic. Does anybody want to touch in on this topic at all?
I used to work for the DIA in air order battle, and the DIA tried to keep track of all the aircraft in the world. And I mean, we with satellite photography, we would see the aircraft and measure it and get its dimensions and everything, figure out what aircraft it was. And I think they do that for all over the world. I mean, it's all classified.
Okay, great. Go ahead, please do.
In support of your statement, Chant, this is Peter speaking from Washington State. I agree with your statement. I alluded to the Naval Space Surveillance System, and it can be found on the internet quite easily. That was run, I presume, from shortly after when Sputnik was launched in October of '57 to just a few years ago. And the system is ideally suited for detecting not only satellites and other orbiting objects, but UFOs as well. So the U.S. Navy, and therefore the government, must have been detecting UFOs directly on a real-time basis for decades, at least 5 decades, I would say.
Can I jump back in here again? This is Jan. Peter, you're absolutely correct. In fact, Greenwood did a FOIA to the Navy, and they sent him. They said these might be interesting to you, and they sent them a whole bunch of angles where they had detected unknown objects. They claimed that they didn't have the money to go ahead and figure out what they were. I would also refer people to Brad Sparks's articles in Gary Clark's New Encyclopedia about NORAD and how their unknown list, how it figures into the UFO thing. And while I can talk to you, I want to say I salute you. I can't believe the work that you've done here, Peter. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the comment. Thanks for the nice compliment. The government has clearly been detecting UFOs using radars and passive radars for decades, and it's proof positive, I think, that they've been lying to us since 1947 or even before then.
Okay, Peter, thank you very much for that input. And yes, I know we've thanked you before, but Jan did say thank you again for good reason. We really can't thank you enough for all the valuable work that you've contributed to the UFO community. Michael, I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about this topic that Jan has brought up? Do you have any sentiments or insight you want to share about it?
Well, yes. It's very amazing to me, and I'm sure all of us seasoned people that have been involved in this field for decades, literally most of us here on the panel, is that why all of a sudden, December 16th, 2017, the floodgates have opened with actual confirmation from the Pentagon, the Department of Defense, the Navy, all of these government and military entities actually now coming forth, confirming the existence of UFOs and giving us gun camera footage of the same. And now we're seeing the topics discussed on mainstream media, on our cable channels galore, with Project Blue Book, starting its third season eventually. Unidentified with Lou Elizondo and To the Stars Academy. These folks are all government, retired officials that are still involved in this thing. And literally, as Grant Cameron has mentioned, most of these people that you see out there that are still involved in these high-level programs have been so since the aviary days. Decades ago, they've cycled through NIDS, Robert Bigelow's Bass, and To the Stars Academy, etc. So we have to keep asking our question is, why now? What has been the giant force behind this rather quick red pilling, I believe, of the public in this regard?
Shane, I think you wanted to bring up a point. Who's speaking right now? I didn't hear.
This is Peter.
Peter. Peter, please do go ahead. Yeah.
One thing I observe about Elizondo and that cabal of guys is, as you point out, Michael, they were made evident to the American people December 16th, 2017. And since that time, by my calculation, they have revealed or released exactly 2 cases. In that same amount of time, MUFON and the National UFO Reporting Center and many others, possibly CUFOS, UFOs Northwest, and so on, have revealed tens of thousands of cases that they have collected. My question is, if these guys were the government's cat's meow when it came to UFOs, where are the rest of the cases that they must have?
Okay, Shane,
good point. Yeah. So I'm generally supportive of the TTSA, and it's because they have accomplished some things that we've not seen in 70 years. I mean, the revealing of AATIP as a government UFO study program, for example, or as was mentioned, gun camera footage. I bet we have 70 years worth of gun camera footage and we've not seen it. And, it is an impressive compilation of folks that, got together and are participating in this. However, that being said, for all the reasons that both Jan and Peter mentioned, at its root, this organization is based on intelligence. And I think that we have to be careful and take everything that we hear with a grain of salt because of that close relationship and origins to intelligence, which is designed to obfuscate and keep something secret. They might have thrown us a little bit of a bone here and there, which great, appreciate it. The Navy acknowledging UFOs are real, that's big, altering their reporting program. So again, no organization is perfect, and I think we all always have to have our BS meter set on high and filter some of this stuff. But to some extent, they've accomplished some things that haven't been accomplished in 70 years, so I at least tip my hat off to that.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Irena Scott, did you have anything you wanted to share on that topic?
Yeah, I think they have a lot more data they don't give out because they keep track of everything that's flying by satellite photography, and so they know what's flying over where. And they, I'm sure they identify everything they possibly can. And keep track of everything else.
This is Peter. I'd like to make a comment about that. Is my understanding correct that Elizondo has asserted that he was allowed to talk about his work the day after he left the service, even though he had at least a top secret security clearance? I had one of those too back in the 70s, and there was a 5-year embargo on my talking about anything I had done. So it seems strange to me that he would have been cleared for discussing his work while he was still in uniform.
Okay.
What's your thought on that, Jan?
Well, I was quoting the New York Times article that said most of this stuff is unclassified. And then I expected, let's go to a couple of these conferences and listen to this guy. And, he talks, he's very entertaining, and he's very charming, let's put it that way. But he says very, when you get to the end of his presentation, what has he told you? Almost nothing. Very little stuff comes out. The Huntsville conference, they got to ask questions down there, but they had to be submitted in advance. And of course, the government is constantly contradicting what he's saying. He told them in Huntsville that his 100% of his time was spent on UFOs, and of course the government said, first of all, he didn't have any connection with AATIP, and second, it had nothing to do with UFOs. I mean, all I can say about the government is they never tell the truth.
Yeah. Has Elizondo been presented with this observation that you make, Jan? And what is
yeah, it's hard to, I belong to that group that posts all the time, but you can't say anything bad about him. And I'm not saying anything bad. I just have some questions, but you don't even want to ask questions because they jump all down your throat.
Yeah.
Let's leave it at that.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in here, Jan, because it sounds like you have a lot of angst and emotion about that topic. I know I do. I might come across as being monotone about it. Believe me, I feel the same way you do in many respects. Wanted to ask Earl if he shared the same sentiment, or if you have any other insight on this topic you wanted to share with us.
Thanks, Chant. One thing I think you have to remember about AATIP is that they are predisposed to see, they're looking for threats. I mean, it was originally a threat assessment group. And their Pentagon, it was at origin in the Pentagon. So, I mean, I guess you kind of want them to be protecting us, right? That's what the Pentagon does. But I think it's kind of unfortunate that is carried on into their civilian, quote unquote group, to the Stars Academy, because listening to the various players and having heard a couple of them speak at Alien Con and things like that, I mean, they do admit that, it's a threat assessment group originally is what it came from. So, they're kind of presupposing that it's a threat.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I wanted to tell our listeners a little bit about Peter Davenport. And that is, Peter actually spent time and seeing the McMinnville, Oregon UFO festival that McMinniman's Hotel had there in Oregon. And he was there with a lot of folks that we actually know very well: Alejandro Rojas, Karen Berard, Michael W. Hall, and his son. And we actually had the privilege and a pleasure of being able to interview all of those folks. Also, we were able to interview Phoenix MUFON the team that actually went over there to go listen to Peter speak and to all the rest of the wonderful speakers that were there at that conference. But anyway, Peter Davenport has been the director of the National UFO Reporting Center since 1994. Peter reports UFO sighting cases regularly on the Jeff Brent's radio show and other shows. He presents lectures on specific UFO cases, most notably the Phoenix Light sighting, in addition to being the director of the National UFO Reporting Center. Peter has served as the director of investigations for the Washington Center, a chapter of the Mutual UFO Network also. He received his undergraduate education at Stanford University in California, where he earned a bachelor's degree in both Russian and biology, as well as a translator's certificate in Russian translation. His graduate education was completed at the University of Washington in Seattle, where he earned an MS degree in the genetics and biochemistry of fish from the College of Fisheries, as well as an MBA degree in finance and international business from the Graduate School of Business. Not a lot of people know your extensive background regarding education, Peter. I think it's really important for people to know that.
Thank you for reading that. I'm not sure how much of any of what you've said has to do with my work in ufology, except in a general sense. But it's been a long, tortuous past that has led me to being a UFO investigator. My first sighting was in, I think, July of 1954. I've talked about it on Michael W. Hall's program and elsewhere, but thanks for sharing that information with the other people on the line.
Great, Peter. Thank you. It was a pleasure and a privilege having you on our show today. We certainly hope to have you on again. And also wanted to just thank our wonderful panelists who have spent their lives to the UFO, dedicated to the UFO topic. And we appreciate you very much, and we look forward to having you on the show again.
Great group of people.
Yep.
This is Peter again. I just want to compliment all those people who've been on this program, because it represents a lot of experience and a lot of competency in the field of ufology and UFO research.
All right, and Frank, also thank you very much for giving us a forum to talk here.
Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it. And are we good? Is that about it?
Yes, and we appreciate everybody here. So thank you. If everybody wants to chime in and say goodbye, here's your opportunity.
Thank you, Chant. Thank you, Frank.
I would like to. I'd just like to say, too, to both Peter and Jen, that you guys are the giants on whose shoulders many of us stand today. And I just really want to thank you for all your efforts and your commitment and diligence and hard work. You're amazing. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well said.
Thank you very much. We're all giants in this field, I think.
Well, thanks, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. And we'll be back with another show at some point down the road. Thanks a lot. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and have a good week. Bye-bye now.
Thanks, Champ.